What I did my presentation on tonight was literacy in Appalachia, and some of us call it Appalachia, some of us call it Appalachia. It's actually, there's a division right around the Mason-Dixon line where people kind of choose to say that word, Appalachia, Appalachia. I think we should actually be saying Appalachia, not that it's right or wrong, but that's what we're accustomed to. The reason why I decided to do it on literacy in Appalachia, is because it's something that I, back in 2008, started thinking about, like a lot. I was a new student. Dr. Ruby Payne came in and did a conference on bridges out of poverty. And she related this poverty issue to Appalachia and how it's affecting the scores of many of our students here in poverty-stricken areas, Appalachia being one of them. So that was my first catalyst for an interest in this topic. My second catalyst was Boston University. My son decided that that's where he wanted to go to school. He got a very generous scholarship while he would to go there. You know why? Because he's a minority. He's a minority because he's from Appalachia. But the thing that bothered me the most, because I hadn't thought about this, was Alex talking about how he was practicing not having that accent, not using the vocabulary terms that we use here while he's in Boston. And quite frankly, it bugged me. Because I'm like, this is who we are. We need to celebrate who we are. But I'm trying to connect this poverty thing, this Appalachia thing, this I'm going to go to Boston and be a lottie-dottie student thing, and trying to get all this stuff together. Okay. So I continue on with my education, and I am smack dab in the middle of Dr. Knudsen's linguistics class. And she shows this video, and I'm going to show you about 2 minutes of this video. And the reason why I'm showing this is because this has caused me to think even more about our dialect.
To outsiders,
how do you make it
the
show?
accents and pronunciations in mountain speech may sound quaint, uneducated, or worse, but they often resemble the English dialect spoken in Scotland and Ireland.
I've heard a lot of older women, instead of say rat something up, they say rop it up. Yeah. And instead of your ear, it's yer. You lag. Instead of calling a tire on a car a tire, you call it a tar.
You call tars, I call them tars. They used to call them casings years ago. You hear anybody said, hook them casings on that thing? Yes, casings. Then I call them tars, you know. I went to want some tars, hooked them tars, and they call them tires.
Talking about like that, like you had some wood out in the yard. Instead of saying carry it in the house, you'd say coat it in the house. Like you had something that you wanted to put in a paper bag, you put in a paper post, you know, instead of a paper bag. Well, the way people talk around here, I guess it'd be more like you call hillbilly style or something, I guess. I don't know, just mountain talk.
Beautiful pictures of
Most
mountains.
of your local people have your mountain talk. That's the way you can tell the mountain people from your outsiders, by their language they use. Say, I'll see you over yonder. Means I'll see like in Waynesville. It's a mountain top kind of.
Never nothing stops. It's like singing, you know. We're kind of like we're singing. Lita said, we're singing, not talking, you know.
We're singing, not talking. Something we need to think about is that is us. We really are in that box. We really do sound like that to outsiders. It is for real. We have a tendency throughout poverty, throughout Appalachia, we have a tendency to take ourselves out of that element, the element that we're really in. We tend to think, oh, you know, those people are our neighbors. They're right here. But it's really us. Back in 1995, two people by the name of Hart and Risley did an extensive research on gaps based on economic disparity. They found it was amazing. They found that children who are from welfare families over a course of 3 years were exposed to half as much vocabulary words in the first 3 years of their life as were working class families. But what's even more disturbing is the working class families were exposed to even more than half as much as professional family children. This is over the course of the first 3 years of a child's life, and how profoundly that affects that child, not just from the age of 3, but from the age of 3 and beyond. The number of words that children are exposed to for the first 48 months, Hart and Risley found out, families that are on welfare, around 15 million words. If you're from a professional family, 50 million words. The first 4 years of a child's life. There's a huge need for us as educators, which is really what my presentation is about, is our awareness as educators when we go into the classroom. There is so much literature that I love this topic so much. And new information that I got while reading some of this literature, and I'm going to read this because I really don't even know how better else to say it. A study that was done, it was called Stories We Haven't Heard Yet, and it was done in 2004. This is a quote from this study. Negative symbolic values that are present when overheard in language and imagery of American culture, because perhaps prejudice against rural working class Appalachian people is so entrenched, it goes unquestioned. While negative stereotypes of blacks, Latinos, and women have increasingly become under fire in the past decades, stereotypes of poor rural people, especially Southerners from the Appalachian Mountains, continues to thrive. Ladies and gentlemen, the Beverly Hillbillies, there was a big upheaval just about 2 years ago about a movie that was coming out that they were going to produce about the Beverly Hillbillies. There's some sort of, what do they call it, reality TV show where they're making fun, and that's what they're doing, they're making fun of people from our area. You get this embedded in your mind, whether you're from poverty or not, you're still from this area. You have to overcome that if it's looked at as a negative way. The book Shiloh. That book has won a Nobel Peace Prize, I believe. No, not Nobel Peace Prize, the Newbery. It's a Newbery Medal winner. When this book came out, and this book is written in the dialect from this area, when this book came out, the New York Times wrote a review on this book, and they said, why in the world did this book win a review? This is the language. I just opened it up just right before we came. What is it? What's he got? Darylyn says, pestering Ma's arm. A dog, says Ma. And then she calls out, Ray, is it alive? Just barely, says Dad. I put the gunny sacks in the Jeep, and Dad carefully lays Shiloh down. These are words, dialect, that our children can relate to. Information that I found out and confirmed that I already knew was the lack of books that are out there for our children to read, for the language that they're used to, the background knowledge that they're used to. Very limited. This was in the study that Valentine did. It's called Educational Concerns in the 21st Century. She identified 52 books. 52 books. That was done in 2011. That would be culturally relevant to this.
Is that on there?
I didn't write all the books down, but that's how many books she identified as being culturally relevant to this area. Now I know that I was familiar with Shiloh, and then I was also familiar with when I was young and in the mountains. There was another book that I've read, thanks to Mary Cummings, that was about My Mama Was a Coal Miner or something, and I remember reading it, and it was really good. But these books are available in the library. As teachers, we need to be aware that this is something that we need to also incorporate in our classroom, in addition to books that address all cultures. Have I exhausted my interest in the topic? Definitely not. I'll never exhaust my interest because there's so much that we can do to help literacy. These are just 5 bullets that I pulled out from other articles. I think there was 6 articles that I found. Support students in learning to live comfortably in 2 worlds. There's a term that I learned while doing this research project or this presentation, and that is biculturalism. It's a real world. It's a real word. When Alex is getting ready to go to Boston, or getting ready to go to Germany, or getting ready to go to Turkey, or my daughter Katie just left for California on Sunday to live, there is a biculturalism that they're experiencing. They're having to leave something in their mind. They believe that they're having to leave this culture behind to go enjoy another culture. But as Alex has learned over these last 3 years in studying linguistics, that's not true. You are allowed, our children are allowed to continue with the love that they have from what they've come from, whether it be poverty or whether it's just the sheer enjoyment of eating beans and cornbread and listening to bluegrass music. That's okay no matter where we live. As teachers, we have to help students extend their experience while still valuing the experiences that they're growing up with. We have to teach our children that. We have to build networks that support achieving and belonging. And most important, this was something that came out, this is a direct quote, and it was a direct suggestion on how to help people, not only in the Appalachian area, but also just in poverty-stricken schools. Maybe we need to be a chair of adopting a model of academic and personal advising, similar to what we have here at Shawnee. There's several avenues here on this campus that helps many of us students get through things that we're not accustomed to, because of where we've lived. I'm part of the TRIO Center. Neither one of my parents have a college degree. My mom hasn't worked since 1949, I don't think. And, my dad, he was a very smart man but had no clue on the academics. So in closing, American children of the 21st century will need to develop a worldview that appreciates the richness of other cultures at the same time as they preserve and celebrate their uniqueness.
Amen.
Amen. That movie is called Mountain Top. They have it here. It's so wonderful. It's so wonderful. Anyways, if you want to watch it.
Well, I just like to put a plug in any books by Cynthia Ryland. She's probably known for When the Relatives Came
I love that book.
to Virginia. There's one called In Coal Country. Henderson, I think, is the author's last name. But I really wonder if there aren't more than 52.
What about Jessie Stewart or Jessica?
Yeah, I'm thinking that in this
For children's books, I mean, that's what I'm
in this study, it was very hard to follow as far as how did they go out and look for these books, or what criteria, were it only authors from this area, or was it only books that were specifically identified as Appalachian or poverty, books. But I still felt there is a very strong need for books that depict this.
So people around here don't feel like they're dumbfounded, because that's how you might feel at times. I remember whenever I was doing my tutoring with a little girl one time, and I was having her do some retelling of the story, and then she said she went and washed her hands, and then I said, yeah, I said, and then she kind of looked, and I said, and here's the word, because it's finding the words, and I said, see, it says wash, but I know that we say wash. I'm sure your mom says washing the dishes, and she's like, yeah. And so that when we read it and we look at it, it says wash. She's like, yeah. Just those little things.
Simple little things. Those are the things that Alex was working on before he left to go to his first semester up there. Had a list of words that he needed to fix so that he found that when he went and approached these professors, he didn't look like a Dumbo.
I
He's a-
remember my two colleagues from West Virginia that worked to lose their accents.
This is like, that's what Dr. Locke did, and I love it when her accent starts coming out, when she starts talking. Yeah.
Well, it's like I came here from, just a state away, and I came down and I kept hearing people talk about a holler, and I was like, what is a holler? do you mean you're gonna go yell at somebody? You're gonna holler at them? And they're like, no, it's a holler. I'm gonna go down to the holler. That's what my dad's got. My dad's got a holler. And I'm like, what?
But what I wanted to mention in this is it's decoding. You have to have these certain decoding skills to know what it is someone is saying.
Yeah, his girlfriend said she was at Kroger's, and somebody said, I need to go get me a buggy, and she's like, a buggy? She didn't know what the heck they was talking about. I was talking about a grocery car, and she didn't know it was a buggy.
My husband, where he's from my Lucasville area, and I'm from Athens area, and they said buggy, and I didn't know what they were talking about. So we call it a cart. He's like, no, it's a buggy, and I was like, no. That's just an hour way difference. So.
Alex found a new one, hot dog sauce. It's regional. When he mentioned something about hot dog sauce up there in Boston, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's strange,
How do they call it?
Yeah.
It's like here they call it a footer with sauce, and we call it a coney dog.
Well, they're gonna be calling their pops.
Or
You give it some name.
yeah, I mean,
My sister-in-law never had milkshake before until she moved around us.
well, and when people say things like fries and
If you ask for a milkshake, they will put the flavor in it.
So, but really, as teachers, it's something that we need to be aware of. I know during my student teaching, my biggest marks of being off by both my cooperating teacher and my supervising teacher was my use of dialect. Using the word ain't when I'm in a language arts classroom, which I know I need to, and I use the word fixin', and I know, but I really try hard not to,
It's like you have to be a good
We took people. That's why when you're a teacher, you just stand and be like, okay, today I am English. And I'm going to talk better.
You want to keep this going.
So that's my question.
But there's a lot of truth about the Appalachian dialect.
Do you think it's wrong that I've had a bunch of people text me from being
Do you think it's wrong that our professors degrade our dialect and tell us that we're wrong by using the dialect?
I struggle with that question during my student
This is a
teaching.
good question from
Say-
Jessica.
According to our dialect, we're speaking perfectly, proper using the Appalachian dialect. You, was, is how it is in the Appalachian dialect. That's how it is. So you're using it correctly in the Appalachian dialect, but our professors downgrade the Appalachian dialect and tell us not to use it.
But is that downgrading by asking us not to use it? I don't think that's downgrading.
I give my grammar speech in my ethics class. Do any of you remember the grammar speech? Did I give it in yours? Maybe not. Anyone remember the grammar speech? That because you are a role model, you need to use correct standard English. Tests and benchmarks for children are still given in standard English. Until we change that, until we accept all dialects, then, but you have to know what the standard is. Because when we have the standard, then we can derive all these other things. It's like your code switched.
Yes.
When you're talking at home, you talk differently than you talk to a police officer who's pulled you over for a speeding ticket. You talk differently to an administrator at your school than you do to the teachers in the teacher's room. So you take, these things. And the biggest example I use is one teacher I worked with, this principal didn't like her. The only thing she could get her on was grammar. She had incredible instructional techniques and behavior management, and the principal went after the grammar. So that's why I give my little grammar alert speech. We all speak in dialects. My father says oral to this day. He doesn't say oil. He grew up in Springfield, Ohio, but his family came from North Carolina. So, that's the way he says it. And he stops himself every time to try and think about how he's supposed to say it.
And that's, but then when you feel bad, like, just be yourself.
Yeah, just be yourself. We all know what it is. So.
You're not teaching third grade.
No, I think dialects are the music of our language. If we we all spoke in this plain Midwestern thing that I do, ew, boring.
Isn't that what the,
No,
isn't
you
that,
have your own accent.
and if you remember, that's what the gentleman said on this movie, that it sounded just, the way we speak sounds like music.
And I had somebody say it to me from down in the mountain area where my husband's from, which is Pineville in the Pine Mountains, the Tennessee, where they all come together, Virginia and Kentucky. And he says, "Do you like to sing?" I said, "Yeah, but I ain't very good at it." He said, "Well, the way you talk is like singing." He said, "You connect it, you drag it out, and you make it sound like you're singing."
The vowels. What happens with the vowels? Vowels are the music of the language, and Appalachian dialects do more with the musical part of the vowels than any place else. That's why it's just lovely to listen to. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, thank you. You did one.
You do next because you have to leave.
No, I don't have to leave.
Okay, good.
The group, the book talk, and I'm working it,
I want you to be in the right place at approximately the right time. Okay, so Rachel, you're going to be back.
I'm leaving, and I don't mean to be rude, but I've got to go to the sister city Germany meeting tonight. I'm getting inducted as nominated as a board member. So I didn't dress up for you guys. Sorry.
Let's see, you killed two birds with one stone.
What I'm doing here is taking notes because there apparently was no rubric made, so I just took the information from the syllabus and I'm typing. You need, I think you need to hit that little circle thing on the far right.
That's like $1 million.
Yeah, I didn't.
We'll have fun and take
Okay,
it.
which one do you press?
If I have, far right, this, I think so, yeah. Yeah, you hit the red.
It's still going.
Still going, okay,
Yes.
all right, that's, you can still keep going then, we'll keep them together. And I am setting the timer, so when you hear the crickets, that will be your signal, because we said, what, about 10 minutes to talk, and Catherine stayed pretty close to it. Except all the exciting conversation you sparked, probably less of that one too. Wow. So this series will be on motivation, and then we'll have Elena and then Amy. Present on motivation.
We're recorders. Have fun, there's a reading day tomorrow.
Isn't he great? I don't like it so much.
What consultation about fun?
For what you want.
You do a question, you need to finish.
Did he cheat?
Okay, ready? All right, Rachel's ready to start?
Okay, I did mine on motivating students to read, and the reason why I did this is because I know in every school motivating students to read is a big issue. At our school, we are 100% free and reduced lunch, and so the home lives that they have are, for the most part, not good. And so a lot of the kids say that they don't even have books at home. So when you have that atmosphere, of course they don't want to read. And especially when they get to third grade, they don't want to read because they've been made fun of for reading if they don't read well. Motivating children to become lifelong readers. That was one of my articles. Why should we have to read this? That's the question that all kids ask. Why should we have to read this? We should be able to answer this. Teachers should be able to answer why you have to read this. Well, we're getting information. Or you're just reading this to be entertained. They have to know why. After a student learns to read words and the meanings, make meanings of it. The why is critical. And the heart of reading engagement is the desire to gain new knowledge, follow the excitement of the narrative, or expand one's experiences. I like that. Intrinsic motivation, if you don't know what that is, that's internally, how you're motivated internally. You're not getting any rewards externally, outside. You're not getting pizza. You're not getting points or anything. 3 common intrinsic motivations for reading suggested are involvement, getting lost in a good book. Teachers can help by finding the student's interest. I know I had several students, they were so wrapped up in reading. At the end of their free reading time, then they would want to continue. Well, wait just a minute. I have one more page. Can I please finish this chapter? And that's what you want. You want your kids to want to finish that chapter. You want them to be so engrossed in the reading that sometimes they will not hear you say, all right, put your books away. And so that's an exciting thing as a teacher. Curiosity. You want to intrigue them and spark their natural curiosity. Introduce literature that presents topics in a new light. I know it can be an iffy topic, but I do a book on the Holocaust. And I've done it every year with my 3rd graders, and they absolutely love it. They get so engrossed in the Holocaust. They go home and they're talking to their parents, their grandparents. They even go and buy their own books about the Holocaust. Some not so appropriate, but that's their parents' choice. The things that they're allowed to do at home, completely different than at school. So their levels will not be the same. The book that I read is appropriate for them, and it does talk about it, a little girl about their age, so they really connect to her.
Remember the Star?
No, it's Hidden Girl, and I absolutely love the book, and they always ask to reread it. Socialization, discussing what you have read, you can do they had a lot of different examples, but pair or small group sharing, literature circles, debates, role-playing, even if you just have the students come up and talk to you about what they're reading. I know all throughout the day, the kids will come up to me and just want to talk about what they just read. They want to give me a play-by-play of exactly what they are reading because they're just so excited about it. And if you turn them away, then are they going to be really excited about reading? Are they going to want to continue? No. So make sure you talk. Make sure you interact with them. Finding the motivators. Students are motivated in different ways, of course. They all have different personalities. Building a student's self-confidence is a big motivator. By the time I get them in 3rd grade, usually their self-confidence, if they are a struggling reader, is down as low as it possibly could be. And so that's a big thing with me. I have to build their self-confidence back up in order for them to like to read. Because by the time they get out of my classroom, I want that to be one of their favorite things to do. I know that's a struggle, but for a 3rd grader. Spark new learning. You always want to continue them wanting to learn new things. Build connections. You want to build connections with previous knowledge. You can build connections between what you're studying in science, social studies, all different areas. Go beyond the print. You can get things off the internet. There are leveled books that you can connect to what you're reading. Expand choices and options. Excite students about expository texts. Actually, that's one of the kind of texts that my kids end up loving because we read all kinds of expository texts. Promote conversation and let them talk to each other. I know it gets kind of loud. It does. And it gets kind of chaotic in the room. But if you let them talk to each other, they're going to, maybe they'll share a book and the other student will want to read it. That's what usually happens. And then, you have a list of, well, this person gets this book at this time. So, but it's all worth it. Motivating students to read issues and practices. This is another article that I read. And there is no magic wand to turn reluctant readers into engaged ones. If there was, wouldn't we use it? We would use it right off the bat. Yes. 5 essential areas that promote engaged reading: classrooms and home libraries. Those are always important. And like I said, my kids, a lot of times, they don't have one single book at home. So what they get with me or in our school library, that's all they're going to get. And so if you just try to encourage them, the ones that they check out at the school library, they can take home. Make sure that they continue to read every single night. I try to promote reading a half hour a night, but I usually make deals with them at least 4 nights a week, a half hour, and make sure you check back, because if you held them accountable, it's amazing. And their siblings will tell them. So, children love to read and interact with books more than once. If they read something more than once, they are going to learn new facts each time. It's just like us. If I read something once, I'm going to get just a little bit of information of what I could get if I read something more than once. Book choice is vital in reading engagement. Obviously, they have to know what they like. You want to start out by doing the interest surveys and everything. You have to let them choose. Children need opportunities to tell their friends and teachers how books made them feel. Again, this is me repeating myself because it's the different articles. They both had this in common. All 3 of them had so many things in common. But you do. You always want to talk about books. Rethink extrinsic rewards and programs. I am not a big fan of extrinsic rewards. If they ask me, because they're used to it in other classrooms, so they ask me, well, what do I get if I read this book? I'm like, well, you get the reward of reading a whole book. Because I know that sounds goofy, but then by a month into the school year, they're like, oh man, I finished my first book. And they're all excited. By the end of the year, they have a list of books that they've finished. And they are just so proud of that. So they get that intrinsic. But if you are one to do extrinsic rewards, a free book. A free book is a good idea because what is that helping them do? Read more. Guidelines that research reveals do promote reading motivation. Read aloud to your children. We all know this. We try to read to our kids, if you have kids, as much as possible at home. And then in the classroom, some people say the older that they get, that they don't need read to. Kids, adults always need read to. That was one thing that my high school English teacher, Pat Spratton, taught me. She said it doesn't matter how old you are, you always need read to. Provide many and varied opportunities for children to interact with books. Use interest surveys with children. I do that at the very beginning of the year. You need to find out what they're interested in. I had a little boy who we had severe behavior issues with him the year before I got him, and I'm very strict. So our personalities, we were fine. He knew what he could do, and so we were able to go on with education part of it. And so I found out what he liked, and we figured out that he really loves dogs. He talks about his dog all the time. And so we got books about dogs, and then books about wolves, and he found a series. And the last day of school, or the last week of school, he came up to me and he's like, I'm on the last chapter, but I really don't want to finish it. I said, why? He said, because this is my last book, and then I'm finished, and there are no more books about this. And I said, well, we'll find something else. But it is always amazing, that the feeling that you get when a kid is like that. Give book talks regularly. Provide a conducive environment for quiet reading. I am the type of person, if there is anything in the room going on, my attention is going to go to that. I cannot read unless it is completely quiet. And so I make sure, because I know that some kids definitely need quiet. They have to be able to focus. So I make sure that the room is quiet. They can sit anywhere they want. I am not particular on that because some people like to lay on the floor when they read. So they can sit wherever they want in the room. If you came in my room during reading time, the individual reading time, they would be everywhere. But that is what they like. If that's what they need, let them do it. Provide daily time for children's recreational reading. Like I said, at the end of the time that I gave them to read by themselves, most of them were begging for more time because that's how wrapped up in the books that they got. Integrate technology with reading. There are lots of articles. You can get articles. You can have games with reading. Obviously, there are tons of games out there. Stock your classroom library with great books. Share your own love of books. I always talk about the different things that I'm reading, and so I always like to let them know that I too read books. I just don't come and teach. And I really do try while they are reading, they have their silent reading time, I try to read at least one time during the week. Now, when you get your own classrooms, that is an important thing that they do see you reading and for enjoyment. But when you do have your own classroom, you will see that the time there's just not enough. And so a lot of times you start doing you grade your papers, you start doing other things. But at least once a week, you need to show them that you too have your own personal books and you enjoy that. Getting to the why, motivating students to read. Now this was a middle ground magazine, so it involves middle-aged children. But what they talk about applies to the grade school, applies to the high school. Only about 30 to 40% of 4th, 8th, and 12th grade students are reading at or above proficiency level on National Assessment of Education Progress Test. Now, just because they score that way, if a student has a high interest in something, can they do higher? Yes, they can definitely go higher. It is that motivation. They want to know more about that. So, of course, they can read. They can really put in the effort and read a higher level. A well-read student is typically a successful student. You have to be able to read in order to do any other subject. Students who are less motivated to read typically lag behind their peers and often experience frustrating academic difficulties. Good readers tend to be intrinsically motivated to read. Extrinsic rewards, again, particularly tangible rewards like pizza parties, actually can reduce internal motivations to read. If they're used to that external motivation, those external rewards, then that's what they're going to expect. When they don't get that, are they going to do that? Are they going to read? No. So you want them to continue to want to read during summer break or Christmas break without the rewards. Students who struggle with reading need constant feedback on their efforts regardless of their achievement. Even if they are low or if they score low on something, you have to point out the good things. Point out what they do well. There is no simple method teachers can use to spur students to read more. That goes with there's no magic wand. There's no simple fix. Tips for motivating students: offer students choice in their reading materials, arouse curiosity of books, allow students to respond to their reading through discussion, reflective writing, or both. Frequently and explicitly model reading, responding, and monitoring comprehension. Reduce the number of activities associated with books to focus more on the reading itself. And that is my
Yeah, if we want to get everyone in this evening, we're going to have to not have discussion after each one.
We can just type in a discussion.
You could. We have a discussion thread for that. So, Elena, you're next.
I don't have a PowerPoint, so I'm just going to talk.
The Socratic method. That's right.
Is that how I stand?
No, I think you click on that to. Yeah, we're still going. Okay, yeah, you can minimize it, I guess just Kevin's on camera now.
Oh, I can minimize it. Okay, so I don't have to see myself.
Right.
Okay, mine was also about motivation, but mine's a little bit different. But a lot of my points are the same, so I'll try not to hit the same ones. My topic of interest was strategies to increase motivation in struggling readers. And the reason I chose this is because of wanting to be an intervention specialist, which, as we've talked about in class many, many times, difficulties in reading or struggling readers is one of the main things when it comes to intervention and what we'll have to teach. So I did 3 different articles, and a lot of them interpret a lot of strategies that I think that were interesting to me, and so that's what I wanted to talk about. The first article was about it was a study that was done on it was 4th grade through high school students, and there was a pre and post test that was involved that was kind of like our reading attitude survey, just was talking about how the students felt about reading and if they were motivated to read. And they did this study before their actual study program, and then they did a post test after to see if it changed any. And what it was is they did a 20-minute whole group instruction session, or this is the actual study itself. And in this 20 minutes, they did vocabulary instruction, they modeled reading strategies, and they did read alouds, which, as I said, this was the whole group instruction. And then after that, they would separate into smaller groups and do some small group rotations where they would do some instructional software, and they would model some independent reading with books of their choice, because that's really, really important when it comes to what a student reads. And then after the rotations, they would do a 10-minute wrap-up, which the teacher would quickly go through the key points of the instruction, and then they'd let the students reflect on their reading. And they did this 5 days a week for 18 months, and at the end of the results, the findings were significant that it did increase the students who did not have disabilities. It increased their motivation to read, and then it gave some tips on improving motivation, which basic reading skills of the reader should be enhanced. So you should do this through letting the students choose their own books. And then self-directed learners is crucially important instruction technique that requires motivation. So that needs to be taught to struggling readers. They need to be self-directed. They need to take a lot of initiative. And us as the teachers, it's going to be more important that we are there to help them and guide them to do things that they need to do. Because if we force them stuff that they don't want to do, they're not going to enjoy it, and they're not going to be motivated. And another thing it talked about would be to provide constructive individual feedback to all students. And don't do it as a competition, because if they feel like they're in a competition and against someone that's not struggling like them, then they're not going to do as well, because they're not going to care, because they know they're not going to win. So you want to do everything you do, you want it to be individual to the student and not as a competition. All right, the second article, it specifically gave just 6 elements of instruction that every child should experience every day to help them engage and become motivated to read. So the 6 elements was, the first one was every child needs to read something he or she chooses, which I know Rachel even said that this is very important. Let the child read to their interests. They need to choose what they want to do, and we've talked about it in class a lot. The research shows that the students will read more, understand more, and they're more likely to continue reading when they have the opportunity to choose their own books. It boosts their motivation to read, and the teacher needs to give the students plenty of books to choose from. So it's really important to build up your classroom library, or give the students access to the library at school, or ways to get books. And sometimes readers will have trouble choosing the appropriate books for them, and that's whenever you can as a teacher can help guide them in their choosing. The second element was that every child needs to read accurately. And it is important to give students text they can accurately read and understand, which is what we're doing. We're learning what a student's level is and where we should teach them at. And that's really important because that's going to be the text they understand. If we give them text that's at their frustration level, then they're not going to be able to do it, and it's not going to motivate them to read at all. So if they can read it accurately, they'll have better word recognition, decoding, and word analysis skills, and they'll just enjoy reading a lot more and they'll be more motivated if they can do it. The third element was that every child reads something he or she understands, which kind of piggybacks to that. And understanding what you read is the goal of reading itself. Struggling readers get interventions that focus on basic skill isolations rather than on reading connected text for meaning. So that's what a lot of teachers are doing nowadays in the school. They'll take the struggling readers, they're not teaching them as a whole. In the article it said that they're breaking it down to certain elements, but they're not going back further and teaching it as a whole to where they can understand the whole thing. They're just trying to get them to understand piece by piece, which is fine, and it does work, but the overall goal is you want your students to understand what they read. And then the fourth element to instruction that this article went over was that every child should write about something personally and meaningful to them. And a lot of times in schools nowadays, the only thing a child is doing is vocabulary. They're doing fill-in-the-blank answers or short response answers, but they don't get the chance to write like a critical response or something important to them. If they get a chance to just write what they feel, then it'll help them because, writing helps practice the skills and strategies of reading anyway. And writing is called a composition, so students should actually compose what they write. It should be their ideas and not what you are telling them. The fifth element in this article was that every child talks with peers about reading and writing. So it is important to have that peer-to-peer communication about the books that you read. If you do this, you're going to pay attention more to what you read. Just that way you can be engaged in the discussion with your friends, and it's going to help you want to actually read. And the research shows that conversations with peers improve comprehension and engagement with text. And then the last element in this article was that every child listens to a fluent adult read aloud. And this is important. I mean, we've all talked about this lately too. So listening to an adult model fluent reading increases a student's own fluency and comprehension skills, as well as expands their vocabulary, background knowledge, sense of story, and text structures. And then the third article was a little bit different. This article is about grade level text and converting it to where a struggling reader can actually better understand things. Because a lot of text out there, we've learned our textbooks itself are grade levels above what the students are at. And for a struggling reader, just a lot of the books that were given these 4th or 5th graders, if we actually take the grade level text that they need, I mean, some of them don't want to read 2nd and 3rd grade books whenever they're older. So this article was really good about developing strategies, and there was a lot of examples, so I really wanted everyone to see them, so I'm just going to pass them out and just let you guys pass them around. Which I'll talk about some of the strategies, but I really think it's better to see examples, and that article gave a lot of examples of different ways. And which the article is called Helping Students with Moderate and Severe Intellectual Disabilities Access Grade Level Text. So some of the strategies for adapting the text was to shorten the text and divide it into segments for oral reading. And an example they gave inside the article was, like, for example, Paul Revere's Ride. Instead of doing the whole poem itself, you can do, like, individual stanzas. And then you'll notice, like, in the papers, there's adding symbols to words and then repetition of the main idea. So you can add whatever the sentence is for the main idea, just keep adding it, like, after each page of a chapter book, and then it'll help with the student's comprehension. there's a few more examples, but they're on this ones being passed out. So that's about all I have.
Finish, we'll just hit the pause button because that'll be a new topic then.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Alright, I also have motivation. Let me put this, figure out which button here. Don't like to read, they just haven't found the right book yet. And I thought that was very clever. That was one of my articles. And one reason I picked motivation, I remember being in high school, and my high school teacher, she really tried to help the class understand that, okay, you have a certain topic that you like, but let's try to expand it. And so I was kind of like, oh, I don't really want to expand it, but it was great, and I enjoyed it. And through that, I became motivated to see the different other types of topics that I would like. Few children learn to love books by themselves. Someone has to lure them into the wonderful world of written word. Someone has to show them the way. And I thought that was very clever. Very good. Wow. There you go. I'm glad I put my little, so I can't take that as It's right here. Okay. So I love that quote. Motivation. The reason, okay, this is the definition. The reason or reasons one has for acting or behaving in a particular way, the general desire or willingness of someone to do something. Kid-friendly definition. Being excited about an activity. I asked one of my students that I'm working with, I'm like, if I would say he's going into 8th grade, I said, what's the word motivation? And he just looked at me, he's like, being excited about an activity like football. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. So it makes sense, right? You're excited about an activity. This happens with football. Research has found that the reading motivation levels of females are consistently higher than those of males. Research has found that motivation to read decreases with age. On average, the 4th grade year is when students' motivation starts to decline. That's on average. And I found that in both of my articles, the teaching, which I have that at the end. I'll show you this.
I didn't peak till I turned 30.
That was startling to me when I read in 2 separate articles that the 4th grade year is when students' motivation starts to decline on average. To me, that's scary. It's sad. Something, Motivation is a complex construct, but its simplest form, motivation can be broken into 2 main components: intrinsic, extrinsic. I practiced with those words. Thank you. That's why I'm getting some smiles. They're reading there practicing. Extrinsic, okay. Extrinsic as motivation involves finishing a task for external reasons. I'm sorry, my back turned. For examples, tokens, stickers, pizza, prizes. Rachel already kind of hit on that. When people are, motivated, they will do the activity until the prize is reached. And not always, just on average, they're like, okay, if we can get this prize, we can get, how many ever points. Then they kind of start rushing and trying to reach it, but are they really comprehending it? Studies show, research is showing now that, no, their comprehension is starting to decrease, and now that's why we kind of have the AR, as far as the testing to see, that's still up in the air as of now, according to the research. Intrinsic. The desire to work on or finish a task comes from within. Individuals will lose track of time when when they're motivated. Examples, playing video games, playing sports, doing crafts. This is the long-term goal, and it should be a long-term goal of any teacher, especially even as a parent. My 5-year-old, I'm trying already to let him pick out his books and get him excited. He's already so excited. I want to keep that going. I want to keep that moving. Attain higher levels of achievement in reading and perform better on standardized tests than students that are not intrinsically motivated, meaning the ones that are self-pushed and comes within. Their standardized test scores are higher, and their achievement in reading is higher. Here's another quote. It is this intrinsic motivation that teachers desire for their students in regard to reading. We want students to experience the process of getting lost in books. And that's true. We do want to get, once again, Rachel kind of already hit on that. Sometimes you're like, okay, let's put the things up, the books up, and they don't quite hear you. How do teachers ignite a fire that kindles a love for books and reading? Teachers need to know books. Be aware of current titles. Authors and illustrations. Help students make a human connection with the book. Let them know who the author is. Let them know how the author came up with the ideas. It just didn't fall out of the air. Let them know that they're real people. Students' interest. Types of books to stock up on in the classroom library. Take an interest inventory. Great idea. Value of a library. A well-stocked and organized library is essential inside the classroom. Yes, school libraries are great, but it's so nice just to be able to walk over here to this wall and you have this nice little library going on and it's organized. And you let the students know ahead of time how it's organized. Power of choice. This increases students' motivation. Here's a quote. Without a choice, students don't have a say in what they read. This can turn students off to reading. Therefore, their motivation goes down. If you don't give them a choice, and I understand there's times that we can't. The do list for teachers. Read aloud, time for reading. Guide students in book talks. Hook students into expanding their topic of interest. That's kind of what happened to me when I was in high school with a teacher. When you have a read aloud, this is a powerful way to stimulate students' interest, model reading behavior, develop background knowledge, build comprehension, talk about your discussions, and foster critical thinking. When you read aloud, because as you're reading, you're using, the punctuations and when to become excited and when to slow down, when to kind of ask a question, you're modeling that. You're building the background knowledge, which was kind of the aha moment for me in this class a couple weeks ago. Provide time. Providing multiple and varied opportunities for students to read books by themselves, with others, to others, and to be read to. Make sure you provide time in your classroom so the students have a choice of what book they can pick. They can go and they can read. If they're allowed to partner up, that would be great, which I understand too. You also have to have control in your classroom. Book talks. Teacher will lead students as a group in thinking of general questions. Then allow students to think of their own questions that they would like to ask their partner. This is the goal of the book talk. The goal is for students to dig deeper to reach a higher level of thinking, understanding of their readings. And that's kind of, you're trying to build up to that. Scaffolding. Here's a quote. The more you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go. Dr. Seuss. All my references. I didn't even hear the crickets. I was scared to hear the crickets. Do we have any questions? No? Motivation is definitely a strong support. If you do not push your students into, if you have a student that comes in and they are not interested in reading, you need to try several different ways. Take the interest inventory, see what they like, see what they don't like. Because you don't want to stock up on books. Yes, you want to try to maybe broaden their interest, but at first, if that's not what they're interested in, don't push them that way. First, you're just trying to hook them and get them excited. And I think that's the biggest point. If I can make anything, is let them have that choice, because the power of choice. Throughout the 4 articles that I read is all about power choice, power choice. Give them a choice. Let them decide. Help guide them.
What's your little boy's choice?
Thomas the Train. For 3 years in a row, I've asked, what do you want for your birthday? As far as being, promise the train. So now we have tons of books on Promise the Train. He's to the point now he's starting to memorize some of them. He takes that finger and he'll follow along with my finger and he'll say the words with me. He's not reading, but he is. It's memorization, which is great. You know, and then you'll hear him going around the house. Woo, woo. So that right now is his topic of interest. Now,
what you said about letting them know who the author is and letting them know that it's a real person is a fantastic idea, because I have a little child that I'm tutoring who never thought that Dr. Seuss was a real person. And all of these books that he's written, and she goes, no, he wasn't a real person, that's made up. He never lived. And that's what she's been told. So, you know, I talked about her, and I said a little tidbit that Sam said where he wrote these books and all these publishers turned him away, but she had no idea. So what grade is she in? She's going into second.
And that's just crazy. I mean, because it's so important to let them know, hey, they just kind of follow the hat. And also when you do the book talks, I was worried about the crickets going on. When you go through the book talks, talk to them how the author's lives and maybe some of the books that they have published very well could be from their childhood. So, it's an idea.
I always like it books that has a picture of
Here's my cricket.
Yeah, we did that.
It's right here?
Yeah, we did.